That is the universe delivering discussion point number 1.
Hold on to your sausage rolls, because this week in the wilderness of creativity, we are talking about sex.
And if we apply that to sex, we're not having good sex.
Ooh. I'm joined by Manchester-based psychotherapist Nadine Pittam today.
I'm a psychotherapist and I work in Manchester with individuals and couples, primarily with people who are struggling with relationships, specifically intimate relationships.
We ask those uncomfortable questions. What happens when sex becomes less about performance and more about presence? What happens when desire collides with shame? And what happens when fantasy feels safer than intimacy?
We start having sex at an age where people are still giggling. We can't even talk about it properly when we start having it. We can't even use the words.
Together we discover the overlap between sex, creativity and connection. Why is it so hard to talk about what we want? Why does shame sneak into the bedroom so easily? What gets in the way of play for you, of attunement, of actually being with the person in front of you?
What we want is a bit more of a buffet where you might start with a prawn vol au vent and then you might go rogue and have a trifle and then go back to a sausage roll. There is no progression. We should be moving a little bit more fluidly. You're quaking. You're shook.
Is great sex about technique, or is it about safety, about chemistry, curiosity? Nadine shares insights from her clinical work about removing barriers rather than adding pressure, about adding more, and about balancing self and relationship, which we all find tricky at times. Welcome to the wilderness of creativity, the space for the in-between conversations. And remember, nothing meaningful grows without a little discomfort. Okay, let's get to the episode. I thought we would get started.
I've
just thrown you off completely. With You Got This cards.
I
Is that
love
all right?
these. I absolutely love them. Yes, crack on.
100 inspiring quotes. So I'm going to give the cards a little shuffle, and then when you're ready, you can just tell me when to stop, and I'll stop. And
Hit
I'll
me,
take the top
baby.
card. Okay, here we go. Ooh. Right. Ooh. Ooh. So
There's lots of noises going on. I'm not entirely sure how positive they are.
Fitting for the episode. So the card that's come up for you is: the best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They can only be felt.
Oh my Lord.
I kid you not. That is the card that's come up.
That is the universe delivering discussion point number 1.
Thoughts?
Yeah, where do I start? Wow. There's a lot of talk about, in the moment in the psychotherapy community, about the difference between the, in inverted commas, male-led head kind of perspective on life and the female body-led perspective on life. And so we have been led as a culture here in the West by the head. And so we value logic, we value rationality. And if we apply that to sex, we're not having good sex. Basically, we need to certainly let go of our head, because the sex then leaves us kind of focused on I'm being judged, I'm monitoring myself, and so if we're monitoring ourselves, then we're in a goal-driven dimension, and so we are not embodied. We're not enjoying ourselves. I mean, that question, that comment, that statement that you just read is massive. That is a tiny fraction of kind of how I want to respond, really. But we focus too much on the head, I think, is what I'm saying, as a culture.
And I think we just need to let our listeners know, because you've dropped it already.
I did.
We're talking about sex today, everybody, and the intersection of creativity and sex, or intimacy. And we're going to explore lots of different aspects of this. But I wondered, for the listeners, Nadine, if you want to talk to us a little bit about who you are and what you do, just so that we have that context.
Sure. I hope I haven't put the cart before the horse there, Lucy.
You haven't. I love it.
I'm Nadine. Hello, everybody. I'm Nadine Pittam. I'm a psychotherapist and I work in Manchester with individuals and couples, primarily with people who are struggling with relationships, specifically intimate relationships, but also family relationships, friendship bonds, that kind of thing too, but specifically relationships. And I have a psychosexual qualification. I'm not officially a psychosexual therapist. That requires years of training. I've not got the full years. I've done a shorter course than that, but I do glance across psychosexual work as well in my practice. I do a little bit online too, but predominantly face-to-face.
And what is psychosexual therapy?
Well, since I'm not qualified in it, I don't really know. Psychosexual. So what it's amazing as a therapist, if you put the word sex on your profile,
Yeah.
people then feel like this is something I can talk about. So I'll have couples in my room who come and start talking about how their relationship is struggling or how it's successful, all the areas that are difficult. And they will ask permission sometimes. Can we talk about sex? So it's this area that we are all supposed to know about. We're all supposed to know how to have sex because, we've all seen a 3-minute clip on a movie once. So we're all supposed to know how it happens, but nobody actually kind of really ever really talks about it. I think I say ever. People don't often talk about it. And I think in couples as well, and I don't know whether people listening can relate to this, that the language that we have for sex in couples is also limited, I think. We start having sex at an age where people are still giggling about sex. We can't even talk about it properly when we start having it. We can't even use the words to talk about it when we start having it. And then we're all supposed to just know what to do. It is a doing rather than a being, to refer back to your initial card quote.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think when we had our first sort of Insta chat, and I was gauging where we might go with this conversation, you mentioned Esther Perel, and I don't know if those people who are listening, I'm sure you've heard of her, but you wanted to draw upon this idea that she states as creativity and sex are so intertwined, actually, as being a place that we go.
Yeah.
What's your perspective on that then?
Well, Esther Perel's brilliant, isn't she? Because in order to be fully embodied, we have to come out of our heads to a certain extent, or to a large extent. And she compares it to entering sleep. We don't do sleep. It's not an activity. We're not monitoring ourselves. Although if we buy watches that monitor us, then are we kind of taking something that is essentially an embodied practice and making it a mental or cognitive one? Maybe. So it's probably best that we, ditch those tools and engage with our own bodies. We can wake up in the morning and know, if we consult our body, we can tell what the quality of our sleep has been. And so we enter sleep in the same way that we enter a sexuality or an eroticism, if we talk about it as eroticism, perhaps rather than sex, because that's a broader concept, isn't it? And let me be really clear, I'm not talking about porn. I'm talking about eroticism as a sort of broader concept, which is kind of asexuality in its broadest sense. And so, yes, we enter a place, and anybody who's had conception sex, to get pregnant, that's kind of doing sex for a purpose with a goal at the end of it. And anybody who's had to do that for more than once will tell you that it's just the most horrific thing, and it can put a lot of pressure on the couple, on the relationship as well. So, there are kind of practical examples. I could say a little more about psychological surrender, but we can kind of all. We can come back to that. I'm sure it'll pop up again and again.
And no pun intended. So
there'll be a few of them, I'm sure. We could wheel in a pun every other sentence here.
I hope so. It's funny, isn't it? Because I just want to go back to the point that you made about not knowing how to talk about sex. Because even before I pressed record, both of us expressed some level of anxiety around talking about this from both perspectives, from both sort of hilltops. And I was wondering, how can we get to a place where we can have conversations? I mean, how do we frame that when we're talking to our partner, or how do we get to a point where we can talk about it that feels fulfilling and nurturing and supportive and safe?
Mm-hmm. It's a massive question, that, isn't it? I'm not entirely sure I can answer it concisely. I think perhaps what we've got here is an individual fight. If we can just focus on our own individual attitudes to sex. And you're right, the way that we talk about sex often in our society here in the UK is often much like we talk about alcohol. It's a bit kind of, hey, whoa, and it's all gung-ho,
Yeah.
and there's really nobody's talking truthfully. It's about achievements. It's about um, notches on the bedpost, successes, conquerings, and so it's rarely a kind of mature conversation about what sex is. And I think probably the best place for people to start when they're listening to this is to think about your own experience. Think about, and I don't mean your own sexual experience. I mean your own introduction to the question, the concept of sex, or like I say, eroticism. What happened in your family of origin? So how was sex talked about, and was it even like silent? Because that's also being talked about by the absence of being talked about. So how did your family of origin handle it? Was it sex is something exclusively for one particular demographic? Was it related to success and failure? Was it related to disgust? Was it related to shame? And I think what we'll find is if we took a little sample of your audience, I imagine we'd get a lot of people probably somewhere along the line have learned something shameful. So you say, why do we find it difficult? Is because we're all supposed to know. It's all in the dark. We're all supposed to know what to do, but nobody actually really talks about it. And also, here's another massive thing, which I think is changing slightly now, which is how sex is taught in schools. So we're thinking about this being the kind of compulsory education, compulsory in inverted commas, the mandatory kind of education that we get. Because we can't rely, I imagine the political parties believe that we can't rely on parents to teach children properly. So we have to put it in schools as a safety net. And I think back again to your own education, your own explicit education of sex. How much of that was about pleasure? The bulk of people have sex education that's about not catching an STI and not getting pregnant. Or maybe if you do get pregnant, this is what happens, and this is the biological, very clear, let's talk about embryos, blah, blah, blah. Actually, what it's not about is how to enjoy the time, how to and whether it's a long-term partner or a one-night stand, how do we prioritize pleasure? And so if we can't have that conversation, then I don't see how. And I think that, let me start again. I think it's got to happen on a personal level. If you yourself, we ourselves can't talk about it, then of course nobody else, we can expect that other people would struggle too. And so it's a radical act to become familiar with it and comfortable and confident talking about it just on a personal level. And then I think that spreads. It'd be interesting to hear if you had a conversation with your friends and you approach those conversations a little differently, whether they would also follow suit, or would they go, shut up, Lucy, and start cackling on about, I don't know. Maybe I'm judging the conversations you're having with your friends.
No, I'm going to throw it out to my friends and see what they say. It does require us to be vulnerable, and to own our story as well, I think is what I'm hearing from that. But also how that links with my creativity as well. Because if we're not being creative for pleasure, whether it be our pleasure or somebody else's pleasure, then it becomes something else. It becomes a chore, and it's something obligatory. And so that there's crossovers there, I think, that I'm hearing. I'm gonna flip to my script, because I haven't done anything yet to do with my script and the questions that I sent to you. But hey ho. So the first question, and I know you spent a little bit of time thinking about this, and I am going to put the questions that I have proposed to Nadine in the show notes as well, with some other reflective questions in Substack probably. But the first question was about creativity requiring risk and the willingness to trust, and this idea that so many of us find the not knowing really, really uncomfortable. And so do you want to share what you'd kind of been reflecting on with that question?
Okay, let me start with in a bizarre place that I'm hoping will shock everybody. Let's start with McDonald's, because you did not expect me to start there. Right. Why is McDonald's so successful? It's because you know what you're getting. Wherever you are in the world, the quality might not be as good as a local restaurant run by, a trattoria or something run by a family, but you know what you're getting. So our brains are set up to want to know what we're getting, and so McDonald's has thrived. People stay in harmful relationships because they're known harmful. The freedom of kind of coming out of that, the unknown freedom, feels much less safe than that kind of known suffering that people are caught in. So I'm trying to start with McDonald's by giving people a hook. We can see that McDonald's is globally successful, and it's not successful and never has suggested that it's the best food in the world. That's not what it's selling, but it's selling predictability. It says if you go in New York or if you go in Kenya, wherever you are, you're going to get the same burger. So it takes out that part of the brain that needs to predict. And so now to a little bit of research, which is by a scientist called Lisa Feldman Barrett. And she's written a brilliant book called How Emotions Are Made. And she states she believes that 80% of our brain's functioning relies on prediction. 80%. I think that's a phenomenon. When I read that, I was blown away. So I think 80% is a lot.
My gosh.
And she bases the whole kind of theory on a sort of body budget. So it costs energy for the brain to experience something new. It costs the body resources in order to accept and be open and accept something brand new. So the brain's job really is to keep the body within a kind of survivable, efficient range of resources so that it's not expending too much. Because let's not forget for a second that the brain is designed to keep us alive. It's not designed to make us happy. We are not entitled to be happy. We have no right to be happy. We just have a brain that says, I'm going to keep you alive at all costs. And so that invariably means let's conserve our resources. So what we'll do is we'll go for everything that becomes familiar. So we choose familiarity every single time. We'll choose familiarity unless we've had a childhood where change has been well handled, or maybe we've had trauma, which means that we can't stay the same because we like nervous system dysregulation on a regular basis. So we'll throw the board game in the air regular and often. So the brain likes to be right much more than anything else. So there's an episode of Black Mirror, actually, where I think it's in one of the earlier series where there's a piece of tech in people's glasses or like in the corner of their eye. And you can rewind conversations and you can play the conversations again. And how the episode plays out is that this guy says, no, you said this thing and I can prove you said this thing because I'm right and I've got the truth here. And he replays it and essentially ends up alone. Because he's so fixated on being right that he's also alone. Which is also, it's another thing Esther Perel talks about with her couples in therapy. She'll often say, you can be right and alone. Or you can open your mind and try and take in the other person's experience. And of course, that we're talking about sex here. We're not just talking about one person being right about a burger or one person being right about the best route to get to work. We're talking about one person being able to just not know sexually in a sexual encounter, not know what comes next. To be able to enter the space of what is it between us that wants to happen here? That is not in my control. What am I sensing in this other body? Because if we tune into that, and the tantric sex kind of theory definitely gets us to do that, to really try and disengage the brain and let your sensations feel. And when you tune into that, there's no question of what comes next. There's no question of what should I do, because it just becomes the most organic sort of unfolding. And then you're having great sex.
How do we start to attune to each other in that moment?
It's interesting you finished that question with something that's going to flip my response a little bit. You said in that moment, and it's not an in that moment task. I think it's a bit of a lifestyle choice. So she called Karen Gurney. She writes a lot about sex as well. She's a sex therapist I think she's a sex therapist. She talks a lot about sex anyway. And she talks about that flirting starts, foreplay starts when the last sexual encounter ends. And so this is not about foreplay being, we're not looking at a menu here and saying, I'd like option number 1, please. And also we should not be seeing this like a dinner. There's a starter, a main course, and then a dessert. That's not how sex is at its best. What we want is a bit more of a buffet where you might start with a prawn vol au vent, and then you might go rogue and have a trifle and then go back to a sausage roll. There is no progression. We should be moving a little bit more fluidly through the menu of what, you're quaking. You're shocked.
I do love a sausage roll.
Good. Oh, so many jokes for a little time.
Oh, gosh.
Where were we? I've lost us, Lucy. I've lost us.
Sorry, I apologise. So you were talking about trifle, sausage roll.
I don't think the trifle was the point I was making.
This idea.
You were saying in the moment. That's it.
It's in the moment, attuning.
More than the moment. Yeah. So I think being able to contact your body is something that is it needs to be done beyond the bedroom, so to speak, but also then maybe the bedroom is the hardest place for it to be done. So there's somebody who used to come and see me, and I'd try and get this person to get in touch with their body a little bit. Kind of, how are you feeling right now? And they'd check their watch and go, well, my heart rate's up. What hope do we have of being able to connect to our body if we can't even sense our heart rate? For somebody to be so disconnected from themselves. And it's almost pointless me sitting here and saying, how do we connect to our body? Because if somebody were to type grounding techniques or mind-body awareness into Google, they would come up with a million different meditations or 10-minute kind of body scans, that kind of thing. A body scan will help. So they're all techniques that will help you get in touch, but it's all nothing if we don't have the mental / emotional capacity to take that risk. You've used the word risk. I've used the word risk. If somebody's body is filled with shame every time they get naked, or every time they see their partner naked, or every time something is mentioned that relates to this particular sexual act that they're about to do, if a body goes into panic, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what we've done in advance of that. We need to work on that in that moment. And the question is as broad as the individuals who are in front of us, really. But getting in touch with the body, people can Google that. There are a million little techniques that people can get stuck into. But if you have something that's stopping you doing that because you've got shame, or you've previously suffered abuse, then you go and get yourself a therapist who can talk you through those things gently and get you to slowly expand what we call our window of tolerance so that we can start to have a broader experience.
Creativity allows me to attune to myself. So when I'm in the creative process of editing the episodes, and I'm in that moment, I'm in that world, and I'm listening for the story, and my creative juices are flowing, I am connected to myself. And I wonder for those people who are also exploring creative practice in whatever way, what they get out of that, and that vulnerability, and how they can then take that into their intimate relationships, if that makes sense. Am I speaking complete gobbledygook?
You're saying, how do people who are familiar with the process of being creative, who are familiar with creativity, how does that sort of transfer onto or into sex?
Yeah. How can they use that knowledge and that understanding and that, the understanding of the creative process into their intimate relationships, or how they communicate about what they want, what they desire?
Okay. So you're talking a little bit about play, I think. You're talking about that sort of play state of of freedom and a sort of meditative, I was going to say narrow focus, but it's kind of almost the opposite, isn't it? It's a sort of like I'm at one with the world, if that doesn't sound too up its own
No, that's
arse.
exactly what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
No pun intended. I love it.
So in which case, you're talking there about removing an outcome. And
Yes.
again, this is difficult because of the starter, main course, dessert approach that we have to sex. And so if we want to enter a play state, then we have to make sure the person that we're with also wants to enter that play state. And so we have to have had a conversation about that. So we have to have been able to, like I said at the beginning, that radical thing that we have to be able to talk about sex in order to have that conversation with our partners in the first instance. And then we've got to enter that place. And then, if I can draw on another theory now, there is a brilliant book that if anybody is interested in reading any more about this, I say anyone, it's a particularly female-centric book, but it's called Come As You Are, super title, Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. Emily Nagoski. And she's also done a couple of TED Talks, and she's got a brief podcast as well. And she's brilliant, and she's sparky, and she's relatable, and she has found this bit of research that she's kind of made her own, really, about the accelerators and the brakes. So we've often thought in our society about entering that play state is about porn, or it's about sex toys, or it's about adding, it's about more, it's about doing, it's about seeing, stimulating, buying things. It's more. And that would be the sort of the accelerator kind of domain, really, where how is my sexuality turned on? And how do I turn on my turn-ons? And that's all well and good. But what Emily Nagoski focuses on is actually the more important thing, and this relates to play, is that we have to turn off our brakes. We have to turn off the turn-offs. And so maybe if your feet are cold, nothing's happening. Maybe if you've not cleaned the cat litter tray, nothing's happening. Maybe if your partner goes and picks up the kids from school and then comes home, sorts out a play date so the kids can go somewhere else and says, come on, baby, it's our time. Maybe that's the thing that's going to work because your partner has taken care of the kids. And so it all feels like somebody has taken away the break. Like if your mother-in-law's in the next room, that's a break. What are the breaks in your life? And Emily Nagoski, I think she's even got it on her website, actually. It's a list of questions that we can ask ourselves. What is it that gets in the way of sex for you? It's a really important question. I'd kind of like to put a bit of a pause around it, but I guess people can press pause on their players, can't they? What is it that gets in the way of good sex? Is it if I'm cold? Is it if I've got bad breath? Can't have sex first thing in the morning unless I've been to the toilet and clean my teeth. What else? Like I say, does it have to be that the house is tidy, the washing up's done? I can't bear it if the dog's not had a wee. All of those things. So we might, as a culture, again, I keep coming back to Steno, we've got this real sort of focus on the turning on the ons, which are the accelerators, the things that stimulate, which is just so typical of our society. But actually, we would be much better focused if we worked really hard on removing all the things that are in the way. So we're trying to remove the barriers, and that then enables us. And I think this is where creativity comes in. So you tell me, you're the creativity expert. When we remove the brakes and we enter a play state, I imagine creativity is not going to happen certainly for me, I can't be creative in a non-sexual way. I can't be creative if I've got other things in the way. For me, really, really, I'm serious. If there is washing up to be done, you're lost. I can't be creative. I can't be creative in the bedroom. Like, fuck it. No, I'm out. I've got to go and wash up, get my marigolds on, deal with that. And then I've got headspace. And so for people, for you, for your listeners as well, what stops? What gets in the way? What interferes with play? Does that trigger anything?
Well, I'm going to say something now.
This sounds good.
I try and embrace the chaos. I am going to have to force myself and work through those interruptions in order to be creative. And sometimes that is when I am the most creative.
Uh-huh.
If I know I have got 5 minutes to bash out a Canva, if I'm in the right moment, it works and it comes together perfectly. Sometimes I have to be in that state of, I've got no time, I've got to do it now. And sometimes that is when the best work comes. If I've got hours and hours and hours, I've got 3 hours to do something, it's often just not good enough. It's not right. It's
all
the
you're saying
expectations.
is that break, the thing that might be a break for some people, is actually an accelerator for you. So not having time because that's not for me. We're clearly coming at this from opposite
Yeah.
places. For me, a brevity of time, having no time, is a break. For you, you're saying it's an accelerator, which is why these questions are really hard to answer, because it is
Yeah.
exactly, it's perfectly illustrated. It's unique to every single person. So each individual person has to think about what it is that stops play. And you've kind of brought up an interesting sort of subsection, a subject here, which
Mm.
is that play requires boundaries. It's easier to play if we have boundaries around us, if we have frameworks. I mean, you're a mother. If you put, it's a son you have, isn't it? A boy. If you put him in the middle of an empty field and said, "Right, go play," that might take him a bit longer, perhaps. I don't know. Depends on how many times you do that with him. Than if you gave him a few things and gave him a little structure, just a little framework, and then you can play within that. Then that becomes more expansive. It becomes more of an opportunity for play. I don't know.
Mm.
Again, does that? I'm not a
Yeah,
parent, so I don't know.
it's almost like in order to play the game, sometimes you need rules, sometimes you
Uh-huh.
need those boundaries. So then there is safety
Mhm.
within
Mhm.
that. I
Mhm.
get it. And I think something else that's coming up for me is this idea of accepting that time is different for everybody, and this idea of patience. And sometimes when I have got 5 minutes to do something to do with a podcast, for example, and it's not happening, I need to know, okay, that hasn't been the moment, and not to berate myself because I've not managed to do it in that 5 minutes, but to actually be patient with myself in the process and realize that I need to come back to it at another time when I don't have a year 4 show to direct and I'm thinking about costumes. Or it's something that you said about headspace. I think the idea of, yeah, tuning in to where you are in the day or the week or the month, actually you might just need to give something a bit more time.
Mhm. You're talking almost like the same idea that Elizabeth Gilbert talks about in Big Magic. I don't know whether you've read that. Have you read Big Magic?
I've read bits of it, so I know listeners, they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, she's not read Big
Oh, I think
Magic."
it's beautiful. I'm a bit of a Gilbert fan.
I'm currently working my way through The Atlas of the Heart by
Ah,
Brené Brown.
Brené
I've gone
Brown,
back to that book. Yeah.
beautiful. In Big Magic, Liz Gilbert talks about the idea that the inspiration, an idea or creativity kind of almost sort of lands in us, and that the universe brings it to a certain degree of ripeness or maturity, and then it lands in us, and then it's our task to sit with it long enough so that, like you say, sometimes our brain just needs to play with it. Our subconscious just needs to play with it a little bit longer, and then it's ripe fruit to be picked. But if we're trying to force something, because that's what you're saying, if I sit down and I try and force something, then it's not going to work. And I'm now wondering if this is if we can transpose this right into the sex world as well. Like, if we're trying to force something, then yeah, what are we forcing here? And again, if we're forcing something, then we're looking at outcome, aren't we? We're not looking at what wants to happen here. We're looking at um, yeah, what can I achieve? Which is in some way, I don't know, are we, yeah, trying to prop up our egos, or trying to prop up our
Mm.
idea of what our relationship should be, or what single life should be? What narrative are we trying to prop up if we're forcing something before it's ready?
And for those of you who, do have children, and a lot of the time is spent caregiving, the last thing that we might want to do is to be intimate because we're touched out.
Mhm.
And it's almost like you shed a skin. Like, I'm shedding the skin of being a parent, and we've only got this short period of time to be intimate, and we've got to do it now, otherwise there's going to be another 6 months. So, and it does, you do end up having to think, oh, you're planning it in, this idea, this romanticized idea of, sex is spontaneous, and, it happens when you've been out for drinks and you've been with friends and you're all dolled up. I mean, really? Yeah, sometimes you do have to put it in the calendar.
You're talking again, Emily Nagoski language. She talks about responsive desire and spontaneous desire, and that almost always when we see sex in the media, it's spontaneous desire. You have two people colliding in a way that would break dentures. They collide in a really powerful and passionate way, and they're ripping each other's clothes off. And that spontaneous desire is what we think should happen. That's what sex should be. But actually, it's not necessarily a mature approach to sex. And there's a bloke called David Schnarch who says quite crudely, you might as well go and relieve yourself on a lamppost. If that's the kind of sex you're having, it's about a functional sexual release. And actually, how much of that is about an evolving and emerging pleasure between you and another person. So, or people, if you're that way inclined. So maybe the idea is, yes, schedule it in the calendar. You put yourself in bed. Let's say that. Let's just pluck a location out of thin air. So you put yourself in bed naked with the person that you want to have sex with, maybe, or you would quite like to have sex with sometimes. You might not want to have sex with them in that moment, but all you've got to be is willing. And then in that space, you just in fact, this answers a question you asked earlier. You just focus on what feels nice. So you're not going anywhere. We're not saying, oh, I can't wait because I'm going to have my orgasm in 3 minutes, 20 minutes, 4 hours, whatever. No. I'm just going to do this thing that feels nice. And I'm going to go with maybe asking my partner if that feels nice, the thing that I'm doing for them. And we're going to just slowly just see how this feels. We're going to approach the buffet and see what appeals to us. We don't necessarily make our decision about what we're going to get from this encounter. And so, yes, by scheduling sex, that perhaps isn't as helpful as scheduling naked time in bed. Or if you don't like to be naked and you want to wear something kinky, that, whatever. It's so hard to be inclusive when we're talking about these things because whatever works for you. But if you've got sex on the agenda, then is that really playful? Again, you've got an outcome in mind there.
And I suppose the same with so that kind of fits in with creativity. If you're looking at your week and going, right, I have a couple of hours on a Tuesday, I have the end of the day on Thursday, I'm going to schedule in that time for creativity. The pressure to do something creative, I mean, you want to do something completely different, or you end up forcing yourself down a road that you don't want to go down. So yeah, I can definitely see those crossovers.
And so what is it, the artist's way? What she suggests is just little and often, which is what Karen Gurney, when I was talking about her earlier, and when she said foreplay starts after the last sexual encounter, because what she's saying is that there's a sexual currency that exists between two people who live in a relationship. Obviously, if you're on one night stands, it's a different kettle of fish, but in relationships, we have a sexual currency, and it's about keeping that alive. And so that can be, a dirty text message, or a photograph, or a note around the house, or whatever it might be that you can do that keeps that sexual frisson alive. In the same way that creativity, if you've got all the pressure on a Friday afternoon to do a thing, that's totally different than sort of maintaining some connection with that world inside you that you can tap into. That's different, I think.
I love that. This idea of the world, and something that you draws back to the place that you go. Actually, you're topping it up incrementally. You're topping that up, and then when you do have that moment of inspiration, that big orgasmic moment, you're like, this is what we were working towards all along, and we didn't know it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think you've still got an outcome in mind there.
Because you're working towards something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, why do we have sex? Full stop, or question mark. Rather, why do we create?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what are we doing this for? And apparently there's 300 odd answers to that question. Why do we have sex? It's rarely actually, as in good sex, is rarely for sexual release. If you want sexual release, go and have a wank. If you want actual mature sex that engages and connects you to another human being, whether it's a one night stand or a long term relationship, then then this is not about just getting your rocks off, so to speak. It's about so much more than that, and that requires the vulnerability. That requires, phenomenal amount of work.
Are you missing doing your podcast? Do you think you might go back to This Won't Fix You, or do you think you're going to leave that now?
I'm much more focused on romantic obsession and limerence. That's where a lot of my work is at the moment, and it was too narrow a focus for the podcast for me to be. I haven't thought of a way to do it. So what I thought I would do is go on other people's podcasts and talk about limerence, which is what I've been doing.
I don't know what limerence is. I'm sorry.
It's obsessive feelings for another human being, like absolutely destructive feelings. Utterly obsessive. It's actually what most of our rom-coms are about, and it's what most of our romantic poetry is written about, but it's not love. It's a kind of an obsessive state where people are not really functioning in their lives at all. It's like an addiction of sorts. And that's my area of specialism.
Oh, so you are specialising in that already?
Yeah. So I did an interview yesterday for the Counselling Tutor podcast, and I've also done another interview with a woman called Anne Burns, who runs a podcast called Do I Really Hate Men, about divorce, and again helping people kind of get out of relationships that are stuck, where you can't get over your ex kind of thing. It's a similar sort of process at play. That you think that person's the only one who can answer all your problems. That's my area of specialism. So no, I'm not unlikely to go back to my own podcast. Something new might come of it, later on. I've archived it, so it's still available. People can still download it, and they still are. People are still downloading it, so it's being found.
And the format was you discussed metaphors with guests, concepts, and then in the second part was much more of an intimate conversation with you and the listener, and sort of unpacked that from a therapeutic point of view. And it was amazing, actually. I wanted to steal the format, if I'm completely honest, but I decided to launch a Substack instead. And I don't have the therapeutic training, so I thought I better not do that. But yeah. So I'm thinking now, where should we go from here? We're at 45 minutes. Is there anything that you feel like we haven't covered, or that you want to talk about? This is not normally what I do when I'm recording an episode.
Is it not? Why? It works.
Normally I just ask all the questions and then we go, thanks very much, hurrah, bye.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, whereas now I'm just kind of like, shall we just check in with you? Shall we check
feel special.
It's nice. Is there a message that we would like to leave people with?
Yes, definitely. And I think we're going to come back to that outcome, the outcome. And again, I don't know what kind of creatives listen to your podcast, but I wonder how many of them sit down and say, I want to get this out of this creative period. I wonder how many, have that kind of, and if they can sort of picture what it is that they're trying to get. I don't know. So in terms of sex, I think I'd like to say, if you're asking yourself during the sexual encounter, if you're asking yourself, am I doing this right? Am I taking too long? What's the other person thinking or feeling? Are they enjoying it? What should I do next? If you're asking yourself any of those questions, then if you're asking yourself any questions at all, then your brain is engaged. And what we need to do is get people out of their heads. And that requires, there's so many blocks in the way of that. And this is why my podcast was called This Won't Fix You, because you can tell people until you're blue in the face that they need to do something different. We all know we should eat more vegetables, smoke and drink less, and do more exercise. But how many of us do it? And so what's in the way of us making those changes, it can often need therapy for, or a lot of time and patience with a good friend or a partner. So for me, I think if I'm going to leave people with anything, it is, if you're going into your sexual encounter believing that this should happen, then this should happen, then this should happen, and I should feel this and they should feel that, then you're not having the best sex that you can, at least as a couple. So how can you let go of that head and really tune into the body and see what the body is asking of you and what the body with you that's alongside you, what that body is asking for. And I do think that this is what we're talking about here is, you've used the word intimacy, it is intense intimacy. And so I appreciate it's a lot. And if somebody's afraid of connection because they've been afraid of getting involved for all sorts of traumatic reasons, some big, some small traumas, but real connection with another person is incredibly challenging. The number of people who sit in my room, they've willingly come for therapy. So they are already in a small minority of people who want to relate better to the other people in their lives, and they still struggle to look me in the eye. They still struggle to be with me and really present. And so what we're saying here about turning off all those things in your head, this is not as simple as saying eat more vegetables, because people can't do it. And so look after yourself. If you can't turn those voices off, then there's a narrative sitting behind them. There's something that you believe about yourself that is being propped up by this sexual encounter, your sexual prowess. So, and it is the male demographic is painfully tied to sexual power, sexual proficiency that the heterosexual man has to perform. There's so much. It's such an easy demographic to talk about here, because the straight man has that just woven into every single cultural message that he's ever received. And so for me to say, stop asking yourself, are they enjoying it? It's just pointless. And yet, if you cannot answer that question, or you can't turn that part off, then there is some narrative about yourself that you're struggling to let go of. Have you ever wanted to go beyond the therapist's waiting room to find out what happens in counselling sessions? Join me on This Won't Fix You, where I take you into a library of interesting therapy-inspired ways to help you understand, and maybe even marvel at, what it is to be human. From our yearnings and motivations, through to our frustrations and the patterns that block us as we muddle through life. I'm your host, Nadine Pittam, and on this show we talk about metaphors, models and images discovered or manifested through my work as an accredited psychotherapist. Each episode of This Won't Fix You has two branches. First, a 30 to 40 minute conversation between me and another qualified professional, which introduces and discusses the theory or idea in the spotlight. We call this the A side. And then the B side, where it's just you and me, and we go on a deeper exploration of that theory or idea from a more intimate, more therapeutic standpoint. While the show won't fix your problems, it will give you a better insight into how we live, think and feel. So maybe you want to hear about how kids' films like Frozen are essentially metaphors rooted in counselling theory. Or perhaps you want to make your sex life better by imagining your genitals and your brain going out to dinner together. Or maybe you just love chatting about stuff like shame or death. If that sounds like you, then go to the podcast app of your choice and subscribe to or follow the show. You can also visit our Facebook page or our website at thiswon'tfixyou.com. See you soon.